I don't know if he's coming or
I
not.
don't think he is. Are you sure? Okay.
I think I'm done here.
Okay,
I'll go back and do roll.
I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And Carrie, would you do the flag salute, please?
Why, sure. Please follow me in this flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Adoption of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. KTJUSD moves. Is there a second? Debbie seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, say, we gotta do roll call. Okay.
Are we ready for roll call?
Yes.
All right, Trustee Waddy,
Here.
Trustee George,
Here.
Trustee Colgrove.
Here.
Trustee Wild. Sue.
Aye.
Okay, Trustee McLaughlin,
Here.
Trustee Myers,
Here.
and Trustee Wild. Did we say him?
He's not here yet.
Okay. So 6 out of 7.
And we have a quorum. For the tribes, who do we have representing? We have Chairman Nelson in the room with us here from the Hupa tribe. Who's Yurok tribe? Who is
Jim McClellan, it looks like, from Yurok tribe.
Hi, Jim.
Hello, Ayakwi.
Are you the only one representing the Yuroks today?
I suppose so. I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jenna Haley is here representing the Hoopa Education Department.
Hi, Jenna.
Yes, hey, I'm filling in for Erica while she's out. So I'm
Okay.
here on Hoopa Tribal Education Department's behalf.
Anybody representing the Karuks? What about the Sanangwe tribe? Okay, and others that are on, could you identify yourself? Jen?
I think it's just Superintendent Jennifer Glick. Hi, Jenna. Hi, Jim. Thanks for coming.
Hello.
I'm Margot Robbins.
Margot, okay, and then we've got Carmi.
Carmi Hostler. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
I think that's all of us. Did I miss anybody? Okay. Public comment on agenda items. During this portion of the meeting, members of the public may address the board on matters within the subject jurisdiction of the board. Time limits generally 3 minutes per speaker, 20 minutes per subject will be imposed by the board president. Written comments are limited to 400 words. I'm not going to read all of the rest of it here. Did we get any public comments?
We received no public comments.
Okay. So we'll go right into our discussion then. The Indian Policies and Procedures Task Force recommendations. And who's leading this? Is this Jen?
So did we adopt the agenda?
Yes.
They did, okay.
Margot, which one of you?
I just
I
missed
can do
the
that if you
adoption of
want.
the agenda. I was just checking on that. Okay, Margot. Hi.
So the task force, oh, Megan Baldy just joined.
Hi, Megan.
So the task force
Yes,
meets every other month, and in the course,
I didn't get that.
so the Indian Policies and Procedures Task Force meets every other month, and in the course of those meetings have come up with this recommendations for the School Board of Trustees. And you guys have a copy of this, I believe. It should have been sent as a single copy. Also, the report to tribes and community, which was sent out a second time to you. It is on page 1 of the Impact Aid report to tribes and communities. So the task force realized that the first version of the recommendations was pretty lengthy, and that the district could not, more than likely would be unable to implement them in their entirety. And so came up with, like I said, this abbreviated version of the recommendations. Jim, it just dawned on me that you should probably be the one leading this discussion, as you're the chairperson of the IPP task force. My apologies, and you may take over.
You're doing so good, Margot.
Used to stepping up in a pinch.
So thank you for allowing the IPP members to present today, board members. I don't know what handouts you're looking at, but I'm looking at the identified priorities that we ranked. I don't know if we can screen share that, or if you can put them up, Margot.
Oh, no. Let me pull it up, Jim.
Okay.
Could I do share screen recommendations?
You're free to share, Margot.
Okay.
Myra, would you want to sit over here so you could see?
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Whoops,
See all your messages.
sorry. 1 second. There they are.
So what you see before you are some of the priorities that we've been discussing as an IPP committee, Indian Policies and Procedures Task Force. As many of you know, some of us have been functioning on that task force for lots of years, and I have to say it's gotten better and better these past couple of years of aligning with other priorities of the district and other plans of the district. And I sure like that we've moved away from the previous years of having multiple plans operating or being developed at the same time. So it seems like our discussions at the IPP are now lending themselves to giving input to one district plan. And I sure like that, rather than, going in a couple of directions. So I'll ask any of the IPP members also to chime in as I try to summarize what we saw as priorities that we would like to be considered in the overall planning of the district. Of course, everything is affected and truncated by our current pandemic situation. That it's been a very unusual year, to say the least, very difficult and stressful on our students and families, parents and staff. As you know, a very difficult and trying time for us all. I'm sure tired of being cooped up and having to wear the masks all the time, and all the anxiety associated with the pandemic, and having to work from a distance and having our students learn from a distance and all that comes with that. And so our recommendations have definitely been impacted by the pandemic and what we see as a priority for planning into the future and trying to help with the learning loss that our students have experienced, and of course the trauma that they've experienced, and trying to reel the students back in. Margot, do you have the red marks where we set our priorities, that sheet? I don't know if it's on the.
Maybe.
Anyway, we ranked the needs as a committee.
We have that, I think. This page?
Yeah, I sent it to you guys.
We have a long list and a short list, Jim.
And I think maybe what Jim is referring to is when we were talking about the LCAP priorities that we ranked, that may not have been included in the handouts.
There was the 12 priorities, and then there was the top 3 or 4 from the IPP task force. It's on my desktop at work. I'm on my
I can find
laptop.
that, Margot, in my super,
But I
because I did include that in my last superintendent report. So I can.
Anyway, to share off from this list here, of course, considering the pandemic and supporting our students academically, we would like to, of course, see summer school implemented for the district to try to mitigate a learning loss and help out the best we can. Summer school is kind of a cuss word for a lot of kids. So try to make summer school more appetizing, fun, and intriguing for the kids with activities and you know, all the research I'm reading now is to try to help kids with the social emotional part first, and try to help with the mental health aspects of the students first, and you know, fun comes to my mind, trying to make summer school as fun as possible. I know a lot of the districts on the coast are talking about summer camp type activities and making summer school as fun as possible, integrating interests and what kids like to do and want to do into summer school as much as possible. Also, the K-3 literacy plan, trying to focus and build that foundation is the second priority listed there, helping kids to have a stronger foundation in those first 3 grade levels. And then the intervention plan. I don't know if anybody else on the IPP is on here, want to jump in and share out on any of these.
Well, I would just like to add that I know it's been a few years running that the task force has been asking for summer school. And so I think that this recommendation extends beyond just the pandemic. That's my add-in.
So
Yes, I would
Jim,
agree with that.
hi, this is Jennifer, Jim. I'm just wondering, do you want to have discussions? Do you want to go through everything and then come back and discuss, or do you want to kind of chunk it out into the 3 different areas?
Yeah, maybe we'll just share the broad areas and then come back for the discussion.
Great. Okay.
So the next area is professional development, of course, PD. And we're very interested in newer staff, not just teachers, but classified staff also receiving sensitivity training in their first year. You know, if they're new to the district or new to the area, they definitely should have some training on history and cultural sensitivity in that first part of their induction into the district. And of course, we know trauma-informed and restorative practices, where I think a lot of folks are very interested in seeing as much as we possibly can on trauma-informed practices for all staff. I know we've had Kelly Rizzi from the Shasta area over a few times to do training for staff on trauma-informed practices, but we'd like to see that effort continue. And of course, training on bullying prevention and intervention, whether it be in-person bullying or cyber bullying. And then of course, implicit bias and racial equity training. Very important that we all have those blind spots in not seeing everything, that implicit bias that often we have as human beings, that we want to be as aware of our own biases and the blind spot that we all have. And definitely in the classroom, it's very important to pay attention to our own implicit biases. And then other recommendations is it'd be a great opportunity to maybe talk about a board appointment or a liaison to the IPP. You know, those IPP meetings where we had board members present over the past, I've been going for 20 years now, but it's a great opportunity to have firsthand interactions if there's a board liaison always coming to the IPP task force, so that we're, you know, the board liaison can come back and inform the board of major issues that we're talking about, or just to close that communication loop and have that continuous communication with the board if possible. Any type of hiring of higher level positions such as the superintendent, of course, we would like to be involved in that from the tribes. And I must say this past process of hiring our current superintendent was the best I've seen. I've been in several of those interviews, actually on both sides of the table, but as the Yurok tribe representative, we were very involved in the hiring of the superintendent, and we appreciate that opportunity and would like to see that continue. And then of course, our recommendations playing a part in the LCAP planning process. And so that's the big picture, and maybe we can move towards any discussion or questions on some of the details there, and we'll do the best I can to try to respond to those. Thank you. Jenna, did I hit all the parts there? If you want to add anything also.
I think so. I think you got everything. Just kind of as was mentioned earlier, there are multiple things on here that have been part of the task force recommendations for at least a few years. I've been involved for 3 to 4 years now, and we do have similar conversations every year, especially when we see the impact aid report and the statistics and, you know, the standardized testing scores and how much worse Native students are doing than the district overall, and then non-Native students as well. So, you know, the K-3 literacy plan, we know how important it is for students to learn reading and be literate at that age. But, you know, we see, and we've talked about this as a group, but a drop off in those first few years of school of reading levels and student success in school. So really trying to focus on those young kids. And then obviously the trauma-informed efforts we've been working on for years as well. And those have maintained we maintained those as a priority as well. Just really wanting to see more time and professional development time put into that, and just more involvement of higher ups administrators in our efforts, our community efforts as well. We do have some great school teachers and other staff who are involved, but always would love to have more involvement and more encouragement from those administrators and higher up from the board as well, to kind of integrate trauma-informed practices more into the school as we can.
So when the task force members ranked our priorities, three common themes continue to come up in the rankings, and one is consideration of the mental and social emotional wellness of the students. And of course, considering the pandemic, and we know what our families are going through right now with all the anxiety and fear associated with COVID. It's not a surprise that came out on top as the highest concern right now is social emotional wellness. And of course, it goes very well with the trauma-informed practices and restorative practices that are listed here. The other one that has continued to come up as a priority is the career technical education piece, and the desire for IPP members to see the career technical education piece be restored. I know we've been 3 or 4 years now since the fire with the shops and the loss of those opportunities for the kids. And I know the IPP task force members feel very strongly that we do everything we can to try to get back those career technical education programs in the shops that were lost due to the fire. And I know that it may take a lot more funds that we have access to right now to rebuild, but and those needs for partnerships come to my mind of going after additional grant resources to try to restore the shops. That has come up continuously in our discussions. And then the third one that's come up is cultural learning and cultural connections, language and cultural learning for the students, continuing to offer tribal language classes and curriculum around cultural connections and history. Those were the three top priorities, and I know in the ranking we did. Thank you.
Along that line, Jim, I have a question since you sit on the State Board of Education. The new bill that passed regarding ethnic studies, can you tell us a little bit more about that and what that may mean for our district?
Well, I'm pretty new on the State Board of Education. I've been serving just since July. So I'm going to go put that out there first. I'm new, but the board recently passed the model ethnic studies curriculum. And after studying this item for, I think it's been going on for almost 4 years when it was first implemented, and lots of community input from throughout the state of California. Keeping in mind, California has 6.2 million students. It's a big state and very diverse. I think I heard how many different languages are spoken in public schools in California. It's just mind-numbing. Hundreds of languages spoken by our students throughout California and many diverse cultures. So tried to do ethnic studies curriculum. Pretty controversial for the state of California with all the different people served in public schools. But it boiled down to this, and it was approved in the last board meeting about a month and a half ago. And it's model curriculum for ethnic studies, not mandated curriculum, but optional curriculum. And it focuses on 4 groups, 4 cultural ethnic groups, one being our Asian American students, one African American students, our Latino students, and American Indian students, happy to say, as the 4th group. And it offers various model lesson plans within there. For American Indians, I think they selected 3 model lessons, and their model lessons One is on the mascot issue. As you know, it's been very controversial throughout the nation on schools that have demeaning or belittling icons as their school mascots, and there's lessons on it, and how to help our student population and communities be more sensitive and why it's an issue, all the way from the Washington football team that just recently removed its mascot name from there's a professional sports team, and as well as other examples of why this is a sensitive issue and what all students can learn about it. That's one lesson. A second lesson is on protecting sacred sites, which is very important to, I know, our local tribes. But they focus on the Ohlone people of the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and the shell mounds that they have in this area of the Ohlones, and how to this day they continue to uncover, or when they're doing construction and building parking lots and roads, they find the shell mounds that are very special to the Ohlone people. They are considered sacred prayer areas. And so it's a lesson about, do we continue to pave, or do we try to respect and protect that area when they find the shell mounds? So it's a pretty good lesson that's in there. And then there's a third model lesson in there too, and it's on place-based. It really focuses on schools and public schools in Canada, and how schools up there in one particular territory of Canada, every morning they get up, the kids do their Pledge of Allegiance, but they first recognize the original people from that area, the tribes, and recognizing the land that they're on and the first peoples of that land before they do their pledge. This is a thing that they do in the public schools up there. And so it's a lesson on place space and recognizing where you're at and who are the original inhabitants of that area. It's a pretty nice lesson. Those are 3 lessons within this model curriculum that I think are a good introduction, along with many, many other links. Again, it's recommended curriculum. As the state, I know there will be some new legislation about possible requiring ethnic studies as a graduation requirement coming. That bill will probably be reintroduced again sometime in 2021. But this curriculum is available for districts now if they want to start an ethnic studies class at the high school level or middle school level, and provides these model lessons for the 4 groups that are in there. It's pretty meaty. It's a pretty lengthy recommended, I think a couple thousand pages long, and again, it's recommended curriculum, and that's available before the possibility of this new law being introduced to make ethnic studies a requirement that's coming down the road. So, long story short there. Thank you.
Keep us apprised of that issue. So, are we discussing each one now? That was the quick overview.
Yeah. It's an opportunity to dig into some of these, I think, now, all the way from summer school to others.
Are we discussing it?
What, Jen, I'm a little confused on the process we're going through here. So are you responding, or what?
I'm excited to have to respond to, kind of a status update with the different recommendations.
Okay.
And I feel like so for the, the recommendations for 2021, I think we are in agreement of with a lot of issues. So if I could just start by going through just some status reports about the academic recommendations, and then we can, go deeper
Sure.
into it. So the summer school offering, I have heard consistent messaging that Jim reported about, that summer school is usually, has a connotation that is not positive. So I just wanted to let you know, we sent out a survey, an interest survey to teachers, not only saying, are you interested in teaching in a summer school setting? What particular things are you interested in bringing? And there are certainly teachers that absolutely want to support students in some of the academic, learning recovery. And we got a lot of other really wonderful things that we think we'll be able to put together a good menu of options for students. So that just went out as an interest survey, just to find out, so we can see what level and quantity of, we can offer of a summer learning program. So we have definitely folks that want to do outdoor education. We got a number of classified staff that are interested in participating in a summer learning, and definitely tying into some of the other, not only academics. So also Craig Kimball was sent out a survey. So we just got this out last week. It's going out from school sites, so we can find out from families what their level of interest is, so that we can put those two parts together with our staffing and the need for students. And as you know, we traditionally, I don't remember how many years Margot was referring to, have asked for summer school, but each year we have the offering of the extended school year if a student's IEP recommends or requires that. So our plan is to have the extended school year to offer summer learning options for all students that have special education services, and offer summer learning options for all students in general education. So there's a lot of advantages to what we're looking towards. So it's, in terms of our context of special education, when we had one of the discussion points with Mindy Fattig was allowing students with disabilities to be in a less restrictive environment and be able to be in a setting with their non-disabled peers. So that's that is a goal of special education, is that the inclusive. So we don't have results for you yet, but it's gone out. So folks should be looking for those applications from their school sites. So we're moving forward. We're at the very beginning of the planning. Then are there any follow-up questions on that? Summer school? We can't help but call it summer school. It's we're trying to call it our summer learning options, because we are not advertising it specifically as summer camp, but that's been the recommendation from the county, is kind of think of it as something that's fun. And it's really getting kids to school. And the number one thing that the California School Boards Association was saying, you have to get kids, the attendance, you have to get kids to come. So 4 hours of reading or math is not going to get, you're not going to have a lot of participation. So I think having a diverse offering will be our best bet. It looks like there's a hand up in the boardroom, but I can't see who it is.
It's Carrie Waddy.
Hi, Carrie.
On this summer school, are there going to be cultural offerings for opportunities to do cultural things?
We have some staff that have indicated that they would provide that. So yes.
And also, are we going to try to do some baseline testing of kids that come to summer school, so that the teachers will have this information for starting out the school year? Maybe training our aides and teachers in some baseline testing.
I think that would be a great thing for us to use our time when we have access to students, because it's so hard to do once school starts because we're teaching. So, once we have the tools for what we're going to be doing, at least with the literacy part, I think that could be integrated. We're also looking at trying to add some time on at the beginning of the school year, as you know, in addition. But certainly, doing some assessments will give any summer learning options a more precise we can have some precision there by doing some baseline testing. But I do have to say that really ties into that next one with the literacy plan, because we're looking at training for and support and coaching for our K-3 teachers in literacy, and looking at a curriculum that is aligned with the Common Core standards and has really robust assessments, so that it all kind of ties in together. And I think it will be in its infancy during the summer learning part. So that might be a good time for us to kind of get our feet wet and get started with that. So it directly ties into the literacy plan, which is really the lead agency on that is Hoopa Elementary, because they are participating in an early literacy support grant. They meet regularly. They're doing tons of work. They're gathering a whole bunch of information, including some of the training that Carrie has talked about. That is, part of a plan that they are required to write, a multi-year plan to address literacy. And we're looking to them as the lead, and it's something that we are looking to scale up to the entire district. So I think that ask for a literacy plan is in its, that's also in its infancy of coming into play. And that plan will be written by the end of the school year from Hoopa Elementary. And because it's been so thoughtful and the process has been so intensive, it is going to be the model that we can use at the other school sites, so that we can have a unified movement going forward. As you know, we have to adopt a curriculum across the school sites, across the district. And then, schools have a certain amount of autonomy, but we're really, impressed with what is happening at Hoopa Elementary. So that literacy plan is in the works currently.
Martha?
So I wanted to go back to summer school.
Sure.
So one of the interest forms, the papers that I saw, it mentioned summer school and this may have just been for the special ed, but it was Witchpeck, Hoopa, and Willow Creek with no transportation for the students. So I'm wondering how that would work for families who from Orleans and Jack Norton to.
So yeah, that wasn't so I'm not sure the form that we sent out we didn't talk about transportation. We're just trying to find out who wants to go. We put no limitations on it. So I'm not sure which
this
form.
may have just been for the special education.
That might be, because there may be some limitations there. And
but even if it was transportation, it seems to me if we really, some of our kids that haven't made it, that aren't making it to school, is because they don't have transportation.
Yeah, so the last I know, we removed that because we wanted to find out who are our people, who do we need to serve, and then we can build the supports in. So I'll have to just check with you about that, because we did a revision to the form.
So, and then the question is too, is there, so there won't be summer school at Orleans Elementary? That isn't a plan?
So our first thing is to find out what students want to come, because if you get 40 kids there, then it's looking, I would think we will need to assign staff there, because it's easier to, that would be a huge amount. That would be a great return.
Probably not gonna, but
yeah. I think that maybe we are thinking that everybody's excited about a summer learning option, and we simply don't know. That's why the forms went out, just to find out who's even interested in participating in a 4-week program.
Carrie, talking about that, I think that that's a priority, to get transportation to the kids for summer school. And I think that we can get funds for it if we make sure we get all of our plans into, there's various funds that show you can get transportation. So I think that should be one of our priorities.
right, for this year and next year probably.
So Carrie, are you talking about the incentives for in-person instruction, or are you talking about transportation related?
I'm talking about transportation for summer school and in-person instruction when we start school. Make sure that we already make sure as much as we can that everybody can get to school, but there are kids that there are issues with, and we need to identify that and and get on it to get those kids to school.
Yeah, I think that, and again, you know, in terms of any program that we provide, if kids can't attend, then it's not accessible.
Right.
So that would be, maybe that can either be at this point or when we talk about the expanded learning opportunities, for me to get really specific direction to look from the board, looking into transportation. That there was not an intention to omit that, but at some point we're gonna have to, you know, kind of omit transportation. We just didn't want to attach it. We wanted to find out who do we need to serve and then build supports for them. But when we get into the next part and we're really specifically talking about the expanded learning, that would be helpful to get that, if that is a, you know, a priority, that I can get direction from the whole board to ensure that there's transportation provided.
Jen, I'm just thinking that if people are thinking transportation is not available, they may not be send the form back if they're interested. That is a barrier to equity throughout the district. So.
Yeah, I agree. And when we did an edit on it, we took that out, so that maybe there is an old draft that you have more. No, I remember very intentionally removing the no transportation.
Okay.
I said, I don't know that why would we say no at this point? So let me go ahead and I can double back, and we may have to have our school sites send out a version 2, because if that's the one that went out, that was not the intention.
Okay, so on academics, are there other discussion on anyone else? I'm trying to move this along. We still have another the LCAP to get to. Is there more discussion on the academic part of the task force recommendations?
If I could add one more thing to that part, Mr. McQuillan. When we think about summer school and trying to make it enticing and something the kids want to come to, we're hearing a lot of good things about the advocacy and water protection curriculum that I know has been tested in the district there as being really positive. And if there's any way we can integrate that into the summer school option for the upper graders, you might get kids who want to come in to hear about that, the water protection curriculum. Thank you.
And I just had one other piece to add about summer school. I have a regular meeting with Two Feathers, and I approached them and I said, hey, you guys run summer programs. Can we do something so that we can articulate our summer learning with some of the supports that Two Feathers offers? So that is another, that could be a fairly significant portion of our, you know, human power and our offerings for the summer. So we just talked about that last Wednesday, and they were really excited, and they have the personnel that are available to kind of weave into our summer learning program. So that would be another component, both there are cultural activities and addressing, of course, social, emotional, and healthy living.
Are we ready to move into the professional development part?
Yeah, I'd like to make a suggestion. When these things look kind of separate and segmented to me, I'm thinking there ought to be a way to integrate academics with cultural, with social, emotional. For example, kids could learn literacy and writing by talking about family histories, talking about favorite stories that they tell in my family, talking about, you know, doing some photography, bringing things into it that they can relate to personally and tell their own stories and, you know, generate some pride. You know, the things that are fun, we can put art and music and storytelling and culture-based experiences, infuse it into the academics. And with the environmental science and fisheries and wildlife, there's an awful lot of math that goes into that. I don't think a lot of people realize when you're managing fisheries and wildlife and natural resources, you're doing a lot of calculations and surveying and monitoring and, water quality, all of that stuff. It's like, what are the practical applications that students can understand? Why is math important? Why do I need to understand this? How is it helpful to me and my community, my tribe, my river? I would just like to see us stop treating subject matter like it's all so separate, and integrate it and see what happens when we spark the imaginations of the kids and get them engaged in something that matters to their families, to their communities.
I completely agree. And that's, discussions we've had in IPP multiple times are, well, you can't have academics without realizing that culture and language improves kids' social emotional health. It improves their academics. We can't have art without realizing that also, impacts academics successfully. So those are discussions that we've been having, as well as trying to recognize that it's all kind of intertwined and it's all important, but how can we have, specific recommendations that also realizing that it's all kind of important together. Sorry, Margot, I'll let you go.
Okay. Any other discussion on the recommendations? Jen, do you want to, on the
I would
professional
just like,
development? Go ahead, Margot.
Laura Lee, I would just like to add on the district-wide academic intervention plan that the district leadership has been meeting and have started the multi-tiered system of support inventory of what what programs and services we currently have in place. And following that inventory will begin the planning and implementation stage. And so in terms of this specific recommendation, we are at the beginning stages of it. That's how I feel. Would you agree with that, Jennifer?
Yes. Yes, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was my last piece on the academics. I think that's an excellent point. It really, and the thing about the MTSS is it is, as Sue was talking about integration, it definitely provides, different levels of supports for students across different domains of, a whole child and a whole child's interests. So it is an academic intervention plan, but it serves for all of the other parts of a kid that we want to see healthy. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And again, it isn't, it takes years to roll out and really have implementation. So we're just at the beginnings.
I have a question for Jim. Jim, have you seen programs at other school districts that you thought were particularly replicable, that you thought, you really saw some headway being made with the design of intervention programs at other schools?
I have.
Jim, I was talking to Jim McCullen.
Oh, to Jim, okay. I have two, and I have the academic, but it talks more about what you were talking about, Sue. But yes, go ahead. Sorry, Jim.
I'd have to do some research to really come back and share some model programs. I know nobody comes to my mind right now, but I could definitely do some research. Go ahead, Jen.
Okay, Jen.
Oh, yeah, and I can bring some. We actually did a pilot program at Big Lagoon where we were, and it really ties into maybe the next area that the task force brought about, restorative practices and trauma-informed practices, where we actually took kids out of the classroom one day a week and brought them outdoors and brought them to do team building, experiences where they were connected to the outdoors. A lot of it was physical activity. We took kids paddle boarding and rock climbing, and we actually used that for We gauged resilience. We did a pre-assessment as to the kids' kind of sense of resiliency and self-efficacy before and then going through this program for 10 weeks, one time a week, and had measurable results in terms of students' self-esteem and their connection with adults and children. So mine was my experiment. My model was on less of the academic, but what we've seen with things like athletics and things that seem to be extracurricular is generally students are more engaged in their every day when they have supplemental activities. Really, kind of those can be the real motivating factors because kids have to get into a regulated state. They have some more investments. So I think that we have some opportunities to look at having more outdoor education, which of course is environmental and is cultural, and if it's done right. So with the professional development, I was going to defer to Margot, if that's okay with you, Margot, to talk about the training requirements.
If I could respond, this is Jim McQuillan again. Kelly Rizzi out of Shasta County Office of Ed. I know the district has used her before, but it's pretty fantastic with some recommendations for social emotional, tying that to the academic interventions. And she does a lot of restorative and trauma-informed practices out of Shasta County Office of Education. And I know it seems like she's been over before, but she's fantastic, well received. Sorry to interrupt there.
Okay, thank you.
Margot?
So in terms of the professional development, there have been many opportunities for staff to attend all of these areas of training, with the exception perhaps of bullying prevention. The first recommendation that the cultural sensitivity training be required within 1 year would actually probably need to be a board policy. So far, it has been taking place to different degrees depending on the year. And so, but it has been offered each year. Whether or not all of the employees receive it is another thing, all of the new employees. The trauma-informed and restorative practices, Two Feathers has been offering numerous trainings on that. Again, we're not sure how many people are attending it, but I believe it is numerous teaching and support staff. And the implicit bias and racial equity training has also been provided. I think at this point, we probably need to have a way of tracking who is attending those trainings.
Just a thought, Margot, when you do next year's impact aid report to the tribes, maybe that's something that could be added, is the professional development and how many attended. Is that possible for you to do that?
So if it is a district a training that is put on by the district, we can track it because we have sign-in sheets. But what has been occurring a lot this year is that people will just send out to all staff a training opportunity announcement and the dates, and then some, people take advantage of it and others don't. And I don't know how we would track that, but it would certainly be easy enough to track how many people attend the ones put on by the district.
Okay.
Agree.
Do we offer any incentive for professional development participation in these trainings for teachers or for staff or for the classified employees? that also might be a way to track. If you're offering an incentive, then they'll report that they have attended if you're,
Can I give an example? Is that Two Feathers offer, we got the Chooks Hope for Tomorrow Garrett Lee Smith donation with, and Two Feathers received that with the condition that they train a certain number of our staff in youth mental health first aid. So we we've had 2 training days that were offered over spring break, and we offered a stipend. So we do have a list of, things they had a limit. They can only have 10 folks a day. So it was district sponsored, but it wasn't for everyone because they, again, could only take 20 people over spring break. So yes, we do have some tracking mechanisms and those incentives because people took their vacation time to attend. So we offered a stipend for our classified and certificated that attended. So things that we are offering and putting together or have a third, eighth party that's doing it, we can offer the incentives and we can track it pretty easily.
We also offer professional development days, right? Still, that's part of the.
Yeah, there's 2. I mean, a lot of there's a lot of PD that is kind of a statutory requirement that all staff must go through certain trainings. There's, California law does not require that all staff go through really any of the trainings that are on our list. So we're trying to create some time because there's certain things that are mandated. And then there's certain things that I think that the district, we want to require because it's good for all of us. So it's just putting that time in and getting everybody kind of on the same page. But yes, the certificated staff have 2 additional days, 2 days in addition to student days. So we have, that many hours.
Okay, anything else on professional development?
If I can add under there, this is Jim again. I know the district is really well represented in a class that's going on right now at Humboldt State, taught by Dr. Kishan Lara Cooper on the TEM-CHEM book. And there's about 60 teachers going through that class right now. And they actually had a class section today, this afternoon. And I see several Klamath Trinity district employees participating in that class. So that could be added under here as a response. And I know she covers implicit bias pretty well in that class. So thank you.
There have
And
been
just
a
add
lot
one
of
small
really
thing.
great trainings offered. Go ahead, Jenna.
Oh, I was just gonna say also, Hoopa Tribal Education through a small grant we had paid for a certain number of seats for an online trauma-informed training through Educational Impact. And so we've had that going this spring and it ends at the end of the month, but there were a good amount of district teachers and staff who signed up and are hopefully kind of doing that on their own. Again, those are things that, if we knew, like if they knew they needed to track that for the district and send, they can get little certificates at the end and things like that. So maybe even just instilling something where teachers know to try to bring their certificates in once they've completed an outside training like that. But there are some things that as tribal education we've offered as well here in Hoopa for school staff.
Great. Any other comments on professional development?
Well, I have a question, and this is kind of for anybody. So when teachers are going through their credentialing program, is none of this offered? None of it's offered?
The credential program is so prescribed that teachers are having to take 20, 25 units or so per semester to get through. And most of them are state requirements and not particularly what we're having here.
Yeah.
Some teachers, like in the child development track going through, may get Kashan's classes that cover some of this. I'm not sure. I'm kind of been disconnected from Humboldt for a while, but I know the requirements are so impacted
Yeah,
they have a hard time picking up extra things. So.
wow, just seems like that would be, like, you can't really teach them till you get their attention.
So, okay, are we ready to move on to the other? The board appoint liaison to IPP task force. I will go to those if Margot, let me know when they are. I've been meaning to do that, just had some health issues at the beginning of the year, so.
And Martha, hadn't
I'll
you
add
gone
your
at the
name to
beginning?
IPP list.
Pardon?
Didn't Martha go also at the beginning of the, didn't you go to one?
Yeah, and then I kind of stopped seeing any kind of notices or invitations.
Okay. But I'll go ahead and say that Laura Lee is the official liaison, and then we can have, you know, two of you could attend. It wouldn't be a quorum issue. But there's a meeting tomorrow.
So do you want me to add both of you to the invite list then?
Sure.
Please.
Are they Zoom meetings?
There's Zoom meetings and our next one is tomorrow at 4:30.
Okay. Send me the link.
Okay,
Also along that line, any of your educational board member, board meetings, feel free to invite your board member. We can have up to 3 board members together without violating the Brown Act. But that's another option of getting information to the board is through our individual representatives here at the table. Okay, include tribes in all aspects of hiring a superintendent. We did that last year, and thank you, Jim, for your compliments. That was I feel it went well also. Dovetail IPP recommendations with LCAP. I think that's a good intro into our next agenda item, which is the LCAP.
Are we being asked to take?
so does that mean that these recommendations will become part of LCAP?
Excuse me, I had 2 people asking questions. Sue, what was your question?
My question was, are we being asked to take any action on these recommendations this evening or?
No, there's no
Just
action
reviewing.
items on our agenda.
Okay.
Will this be a future action item on the agenda?
What was your question? Dovetail the IPP recommendations with LCAP? Was that your
Yes,
question?
will that be a future item?
No, we're going to
Will
deal with
that be a
that now.
future item on the board agenda?
She's asking for it to be formalized that we accept these recommendations and implement them into the LCAP.
Let's discuss the LCAP and see where they already dovetail and come back to that question. How's that?
Okay,
Don't let me forget.
I'll stop screen share now.
Our next one is the LCAP discussion of the LCAP and the ELO Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant. So I would like to see where we are with integrating some of the recommendations into that LCAP. And then see where we land, and then we'll come back to that question. Is that okay, Margot?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so who's taking the lead on the discussion on the LCAP? Is that you, Jen?
I can start with this. Yes, I don't know if this will be helpful to you all. I'm going to go ahead and David, you can let me share my screen, correct?
Yeah, you're free to share.
Okay, and for those of you who are in the boardroom, if this does not help at all, I can definitely get rid of this. But the purpose of showing this is getting an idea of what the LCAP planning team has been working with, and some input. So we've discussed several times, and this was what Jim had brought up in terms of the areas of prioritization. And I just want to remind everyone, when we talk about having priorities, it doesn't mean that anything on this list is unimportant. It's just giving us we have to start with something. And so I wanted to remind the board, when we did the community survey, we did ask for participants to rank these 12 areas, and they ranked in this order of core academic instruction, life skills, which included home ec, financial literacy, social and emotional wellness, extracurricular activities, and community outreach. So I think it's just to kind of to take the temperature. It's so that we know that core academic instruction is something that rose as an issue that folks in the community want us to give attention to. That was also one of the priorities from the IPP task force. Jim had gone over the 4 top ones. So I'm providing this documentation to the board just so that you can review what kinds of input came from the stakeholder meetings and what we've heard from folks, and really have a conversation to give direction in terms of priorities, because we are now looking at allocating resources to support actions which should drive new outcomes. So each of these slides, discuss or just, are evidence of things that people brought up at meetings. It does not mean, I think it was kind of an open discussion. So this was not everybody agreed. This was not any list of priorities. It was just some information, kind of the raw data of what came from the community meetings that Tavuchi led, the parent advisory committee meetings, and then the parent advisory committee got input from the community. So what is replicated is these areas of priorities, things that we have to address, in the LCAP. The state requires that we address these basic services. And I thought it was really well done, the way that the stakeholder engagement group, they said, well, we know that we have to provide these basic services. How can we enhance them? So what you have is kind of a big list of things that came from the community. And that's, I think, one of our best assets is we have to ask our folks, what are the ways that we can provide these things. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to go through maybe color by color, because this blue deals with the conditions of learning, and maybe identify some priorities that I can take notes on, and then move into the engagement, and then move into the next area of student achievement. Is having this up on the screen helpful to you all at all? Or
Might be helpful to people who don't have the handout.
I would think, yeah, okay, then I will leave it, because I don't see any, this is probably more important than us seeing each other. So just so you know, I can't really see you. So if you want to say anything, I need to hear. So I'm going to just scroll through these 3 slides, and I'll come back to this one. Recommendations. So these are actions. What can we actually do to enhance these conditions of learning and the basic services? What can we actually do to enhance the implementation of state standards? And what are some actions that we can actually do to improve access to a broad course of study? So I just thought, if the board has, and anybody else who's still on the call has anything that they can see that you want to make a case for, this is an actual, an absolute priority, I will continue to take notes.
So I have a question. So you're asking for our suggestions?
Yes. So I have a lot of things on the plate here. And I think that so many of them are integrated. There's a good chance that we can do many of these, we can implement many of these recommendations, but it's really the board's responsibility to tell me what is kind of top priority. And then in terms of where we would allocate resources. So yes,
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to get.
We talked about this, I think, before. So
We did. And I didn't, you know what I get? Is that Martha?
yes.
So what I gave you was what's at the top here, like priority 1. So the state gives us this information. They give us priority 1 basic services you have to do. Teachers are appropriately assigned. So that's requirements from the state. And then this bottom part with the questions, that's the input from our stakeholders. So I thought that this came from Tavuchi. I thought it was really well done, because now we have, here's what our community has said, here's how we can enhance. But now I would like, now that you have been informed from, you have some information from the community, their recommendations, it's a consultation, but the real direction should come from the board.
Because I had, two specifically, one that I mulled over pretty well, which was increased staff to meet student needs. Because we're talking about spending some of this COVID money, right? So we have like 2 years for several of these funds. Is that what we're talking about?
So this is, we can tie some of that in, but this is, the LCAP really is our base funding, our,
Right.
Our long-term services. I think that I can kind of compartmentalize that in terms of some of the immediate needs, because, again, that one-time funding, even if it's over 2 years, it's not sustainable. So
Right.
One of the goals of the LCAP is saying, okay, where do we want to have our kids in 3 years? It's the 3-year plan. And the LCFF, that is based on our student enrollment, our actual attendance, and then those supplemental, that's kind of our main source of funding and our main mechanism to take action. So I don't think that we shouldn't talk about what you just said with those increases, but just remember those will be kind of one-time things. So we're at this point looking at, with our local control funding, which is the most flexible funding we have, and it's our baseline. How do we want to spend that? So
one of the things that I've always, and I've just seen this really work, is that the more staff you have, the more individual staff time you can give to students, the better those students do. And when we can do small groups tutoring with our aides, and the aides are trained how to do it, it's really effective in bringing those kids back up. So that's one of the things. For one thing, I would like to see more one-on-one tutoring happening. But also when we hire people, or with people we've hired, that we would train them specifically in what they're tutoring. So if they're a math tutor, they would have the training how to actually, do that.
Teach the lesson.
To teach the lesson. And the same with reading. They would have to, when we first started literacy paraprofessionals, they went through a pretty rigorous training. And we don't do that anymore. Now we're just asking them to pass the aid test, which is, pretty much, sophomore.
I agree with Martha, and I was going to bring up that same concern that we need to do more training of our paraprofessionals, and this funding is only going to last maybe for 2 years, but whatever we can do with that funding in that 2 years, we may be able to retain more paraprofessionals that want to stay with the job once they have the training. So we need to take advantage of this and look at it as part of our LCAP and dovetail it in that way. And also the transportation, that's a huge thing. I especially for summer school, any kind of transportation that we need to get kids where we need to have them for after school or whatever. I remember tutoring kids 2 days a week after school. And that's one of the things that's in that funding is, using funds to have tutoring. the teachers could tutor their own kids after school. I did that.
Yeah.
It was very effective.
Do we not have after-school programs now?
We have
do.
ACES, but it's like a homework. They can do their homework and whatever. They
Yeah,
don't
not
have
necessarily
tutoring.
tutoring, but we did pay teachers to tutor.
Yes,
And
we
we
do.
do have Rose Leeser, who did train all of those literacy paraprofessionals for the district before. And I also heard from, well, my daughter, that's the English teacher at the high school. When students come to the high school, and a lot of them are way behind in their reading skills, it would really help the high school if they had, especially in the English department, a literacy paraprofessional to do group reading with a group that needs to be caught up while the teacher is doing other instructions. So that seemed to be a model that has worked in the past to help get these students up to speed. So our literacy paraprofessionals, not only at the K3, but interspersed throughout all of the grade levels.
Yeah.
Great.
If you focus on the
So,
K3 to start with, then
I'm
it's easier later.
Yes.
Margot was talking.
Martha?
I'm a strong advocate in supporting families to get students to school, not just regular school, but also to and from their sports practices. If we don't have enough bus drivers to provide services to all of our schools, then we should be providing gas vouchers to parents to transport their students, because we can't expect parents to be driving their kids back and forth to school with no help.
That's, yeah, that's something we need help with too, is getting people to apply to be bus drivers. So that's something our tribal partners can maybe help us with.
Okay, so then.
We have a really hard time finding employees to hire.
Yeah,
I think that somehow if we could make that a part of this plan, getting bodies, getting bodies in positions
Yeah.
to provide services, because we have great plans, we have all of these things that we feel like would be so effective, but if we don't have people to implement that, then it just goes by the wayside.
that's been our problem. We even have the money for it, but we can't find the people.
Well, you know,
Right.
I'm thinking we can't find the people because we're having, aides that are only so many hours and that's it. If we had full-time aides, at least for the period of time that we have this funding, the
Right.
ball will get rolling.
Especially if we provide some introductory training to
Right.
these aides. I don't know how involved it is to get certified as an instructional aide. Does anybody know what you have to do?
Right now, it's not much.
You have to take a test.
But the literacy paraprofessional training was pretty involved, and it,
And Rose was our trainer, yes.
Do we still have Rose? Is she still
Yeah.
on?
The other thing I'm wondering is kind of a big brothers and sisters or cousins or whatever, if we could incentivize high school students to work with younger students in the summer. A lot of high school students who've like just completed algebra 1 or 2 could, work with a younger subset of students, maybe just 3 or 4, and help them understand sort of in a peer-to-peer way. Here's how I figured that out. Here's how I do those kind of problems. Sometimes it just takes a different way of presenting something or explaining something, but I think it'd be really good for older students to be offered an opportunity to teach younger students. I suspect a number of them have been doing it at home during the pandemic anyway.
Yeah.
And maybe not enjoying the responsibility without the compensation, but if older students and or parents wanted to be compensated as tutors or aides, That might be another way to get more people involved and actually recognize the help that they're providing. Yeah, I think we could do something where we at the beginning of each day or week, introduce a lesson and explain it to that person who's going to be tutoring about that lesson, and then let them work with, you know, maybe a professional in the room or nearby, but see how that goes.
Can I weigh in on this list here?
Yes, please, please.
I really like some of the ideas that were just shared there. I like that idea of maybe hiring some of the older students to turn around and tutor the younger students. It's kind of a double whammy there, or added bonus, because you're helping students plus also giving some summer employment to some older kids. I like that. I really like what was said about transportation. You know, one of the former superintendents pointed out that the Klamath Trinity School District is one of the largest geographical school districts in the state of California, a very large territory. And we know a lot of our families struggle with getting from point A to point B for activities or events or school, after school activities. I like that idea of helping with the transportation part of it all. Very important. And then of course the social emotional part of it, trying to make learning fun, trying to have the kids, reel the kids back into the idea of coming back to school and creating fun activities to get at the mental health part of it all, I think is so important. So thank you.
So I had another, this is Martha. Moving on to local food to support more nutritious meals. Have we ever considered contracting with local farmers for them to provide us because it could fit, if it could fit into our menus, if we could contract with local farmers to provide us with the food that we would need in those menus. I just wondering, because I know local farmers and I've worked in the school, I know it's really hard for them to if we say, we used to do this at Orleans, oh, well, you know what, we need lettuce on Monday. But then our cook would have to drive up, you know, Fishy Road, get the lettuce, bring it back, wash it all up. And so it just never really, well, from a financial standpoint, it definitely, and from just a work time standpoint, it just really didn't make sense. The farmer was making like $5 and, you know, the cook was spending a lot of time to make a salad. So, but if we actually contracted with them, you know, or we were going to pay them, you know, to grow these certain crops and provide us with this food at this time, that might be something that would work.
Well, I happen to know the food service director, as do you. I think she would be thrilled to have this as an ask. And I don't know if it's feasible because because people need to make a living, and then we have economic. I think it's a great recommendation. The good news is also that Becky's meeting with Billy Reed next week, and I'm sure that she can bring that up. And I think that having a system in place rather than it saying, hey, we need lettuce. I think that, the cooks would have to be flexible enough to say, here's what we just harvested, put it in a meal. I don't know. That's a lot on the operations side, but I definitely think that also with the local food ties into so many other issues that we have. There's economic issues that are related to that. There's Jim was talking about place-based education. I mean, talking about and then nutrition education. So that one thing that you talked about, Martha, has this kind of ripple effect, and it can be impacted into science and math, so it's social studies. It covers all of the content areas, especially because this is something we know that we do every day. We eat every day. So I don't know what the it's something we can look into, and it's part of, I think, the cafeteria program in terms of making it, the most efficient and the most nutritious and appealing, and getting kids' taste buds to be expanded and introducing them to new kinds of foods. Because there is evidence when we've studied food service in schools that schools do influence what kids' food choices are down the road, because they may, have something that, a new vegetable that they never would have dreamed of trying. And so I think it does have a pretty significant impact. And I'll write that down as an idea.
On this page, it talks about basic services, and this is Carrie Waddy, and conditions of learning, and it says schools facilities are maintained in good repair. There are some of our schools that still have wings that didn't get upgraded, that we possibly can get funds from the ESSERs. Like Trinity Valley, I don't know that they have new windows in their first wing that has the primary in it that are double pane or whatever, that would help with, and also ventilation that needs to be checked into. And then, of course, the iTech building, if we can even get started with some of those funds on that building.
We have been checking into what's possible. So I know Jen has been checking with the auditors and several other sources to see if it's possible, what we can do with that. There's a process that we would have to go through. And I don't have all the answers yet, but we are checking into paying off some of our debt that we owe for the buildings we do have in place. And we need to keep in mind that we have received over $100 million for the repairs that have been done from the state, but we still owe, what is it, around 7 million.
And in that material that we got
Yes, and I noticed
financial meeting, it said that one of the options for spending is retiring long-term debt. But when I called Carmi, she said that they have to be sure the auditor agrees, because that's a group who interprets.
Exactly.
But can't necessarily tell us, yeah, you can do that.
And one of the processes, I think, is when you have staff that has been spending a lot of time specifically on COVID stuff, then you may be able to journal entry some of their costs back to the general fund. But it's a process that we're really looking into. It's not just here you can budget it and do it.
Well, it really kind of jumped off the page at me, because it was talking like $2 to $4 million could be used to retire long-term debt.
Yeah.
Sue, that recommendation or that piece was it did jump off the page. So we've been working with the Assistant Superintendent of Business Services at HCOE. We've had several meetings with Corey and with Shin and Abe from Capital Advisors. And in fact, today we did have a meeting with the Office of Public School Construction to look at some recommendations for the financial plan and ways that, but in terms of just taking ESSER money and directly applying it to retiring the COP, we can't just pay it off. It is an offsetting, just like Laura Lee was talking about. So I do want to, at the end of this LCAP presentation is the one slide that is not something that goes out to the rest of the community. It's really something that I would like to have a discussion with the board. So I can jump there, but I mean, I think that it's with the facilities, that is kind of the elephant in the room. It is the thing that is impacting our general fund. It impacts this fund that we're talking about, our unrestricted money. So another consideration for the board is really to give direction about applying monies that we can, it's not really saving, it's kind of, if we can assign some of the duties that people have been, that our staff have been involved with that are COVID, and we can offset some of our regular operating costs with COVID, how committed are we to looking at retiring the COP? Because we really can't do it with the ESSER money, we can do it with our unrestricted money. The Office of Public School Construction is fine with that. So they're saying if we can do these journal entries, as Laura Lee talked about, and we are able to free up some of our unrestricted funds, paying down the $6 million debt at a faster rate is something that OPSC wants to see a commitment from. So that's something I have at the end. We can go through all the other parts, but I think that we have to keep that in mind about the fiscal solvency and the structural deficit, which is really impacted and created by the COP that will take years to retire unless we kind of aggressively look at paying it off. And then our long-term fiscal health, we can have some breathing room. We don't really have much breathing room right now.
Are we, how many more slides do you have? Are we ready to move to the next one?
I can move on. I mean, the services are related. So there, you all talked a lot about academics as well as basic services. So I think that this one is worth looking at. This, the implementation of state standards. It has to do with our the content that we have. As you know, we have a English language arts curriculum that is, I forgot if it's dated 2003 or 2006. I'd have to look at our resolution. So this was something that stakeholders, or at least somebody recommended, hey, our curriculum should be, no older than 5 years old. That may or may not be practical, but when we look at the current English language arts curriculum for K-6, it is something that it's time to retire it. The state standards have been revised. We have Common Core standards. Our current adoption is from the old standards. So there is definitely an interest in updating the curriculum for English language arts in the primary grades. And it's a big investment, but that is, that's direct services to our students.
One of the things that on this page, you were talking about the languages. I really want to commend the Yurok tribe for their program to produce teachers for our district who are also Yurok language teachers, speakers. So that's a model I think that has been very successful. And we have a number of teachers in our district who have gone through that program. I am concerned about the Hupa language teachers. Our 3 Hupa language teachers are getting up there, and retirement is looming. And who do we have to take their place? So that is something that is on my mind, at least here. So maybe have more discussions with the Hupa Tribal Ed on that. I'd be willing to come to your meeting and look at some of those issues.
Is Jenna still on the call?
Yes, I am. I agree. That's something we've been talking about as we do some kind of we do a lot of internal Hupa language training for some of our education department staff, mainly our K-12 program staff right now, to do our summer and break language immersion programming that we've been doing for years, and trying to kind of build up our capacity. But that is something that we do have in the back of our minds, and we would like for Miss Jackie and other teachers to be able to retire when they want to, and know that, someone will take over that. But yeah, something for future discussions, definitely.
Yes, Byron?
Yeah, we have a private nonprofit center called ITUC, and we're teaching language teachers there. We have a few getting ready to be actual teachers, but I'd rather not say their names right now. That is a source. We're not any part of the tribe at all. We have no connection with the education.
Are they on track to meet the state credential requirements?
I am not really part of that, so I'm not sure. I don't want
Yeah.
to say something might be inaccurate.
Okay. Yeah, there's, I know, well, Jim could probably speak to it better, but the tribe has to approve a number of things, competency and a number of tests that the speakers must go through to get their state credential. So there's a process that needs to be approved by the tribe.
Well, I could say though that our teacher is Salish. And we pay him to teach them.
So maybe we could look at getting, understanding what those state requirements are and getting the tribe to move forward in formalizing the approval of it so that we can get them certified through the state and then they can work for the school. I think the tie-in is that the tribe has to approve it. So it's not the school board approving it or it's not the state approving it. The tribe is the one that approves the curriculum and the requirements. So I think we're in a good position.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. The Yurok tribe has already set a good format and example of how they've done it. And so that it'd be.
Well, there's a little bit of a conflict though between the dialects.
Well, it's, oh, for the Hoopa?
Yeah, the Hoopa. There's a Red Creek, there's a Southward Hoopa, and a OT Hoopa, which is a true Hoopa. And that's what we teach there. And the tribe mixes all three. So that's why they don't really recognize us, because we just use the original Hoopa dialect.
Okay, well, it's something that needs to go back to the tribe to figure out. But that's a concern of the school here is getting more Hoopa credentialed teachers. And so the tribe has to come together some way and
but we are just happy to operate what we're doing. We don't need to branch out or anything.
Yeah, I think it provides a good opportunity to have the potential for new teachers to come in. Because I think they're a young group and they could actually go to school and get their teaching credentials. And, you know, I think it's pretty solid if we can get the tribe to align with what IPTAC is teaching to approve it, then we're good to go, I think.
So
that's something to look at.
Sure.
Can I go on to the next page?
Is there any other discussion on this page?
I have a comment, and so does Jim. Jim's been waiting to make a comment, and I would like to follow him up with a comment as well.
Thank you, Margot. A couple of things. Yeah, that the tribes can have their language teachers certified by the state of California as long as the tribe has a testing process, and the tribe approves of those candidates, then the state of California will issue the teaching credential as long as the tribe has a testing process for their language. The second item is I know some of you are aware of the professional development grant we just submitted for all of us to support teachers, American Indian candidates who want to become teachers. We know the hardest thing is if you're working already or raising a family, the idea of going back to school again and getting a credential is really daunting because you're trying to pay the bills and raise your family. So this grant that we just submitted is a 3-year grant that would support 60 candidates, American Indians, to get their teaching credential, either undergraduates or if they have a BA already to get their teaching credential, it'll pay a stipend and support their fees at Humboldt State University. And 60 candidates would be a lot of candidates, you know, so we're trying to focus on the 3 or 4 county area to get those 60 candidates. And we'll know in July if this thing is funded or not. And it's endorsed for the whole Humboldt, Del Norte, Mendocino and Siskiyou County area to try to get the 60 candidates. So stay tuned, keep your fingers crossed. And if you look at, we looked at the data for the 4 counties, there's less than 70 American Indian teachers in the 4 county area right now. So we need Native teachers in the ranks also. Thank you.
Jim, does that also include administrators?
There's a separate grant that went in through Blue Lake Rancheria to support those who want to be principals. And it'll team up, not as many as 60, but it'll provide the same support for candidates to go on and get their administrative credential. So I know a lot of districts signed on. I think your superintendent may have signed on to that also. It would be a good deal to support, provide some financial support and relief for people to go back to school, get that admin credential, or for those who want to be a teacher. Thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to add that that on the school side, a teacher that has not been a language teacher who has not been certified by the California Teachers Commission makes about half as much as a teacher that's been approved by the tribe and certified through the state. Also, if they haven't been through that process, then they're not allowed to teach in a classroom without a regular teacher present. So it makes a huge difference for the people who know the language to be certified through the state, through the tribal council and the state. Thank you.
And I just want to add to what Marco said. Sorry, I know we're trying to move on, but you know, we can talk about the importance of teaching native language, but I know at least one of the current teachers has faced a lot of issues, and part of that is the difference in pay, the difficulty in getting the district to recognize the professional development hours for them, maybe through classes with our tribal education, and issues with not feeling as much support and, you know, not prioritizing the language as much. I know in elementary school, it's really hard when, you know, they get students for maybe 20 minutes a week, maybe 30 minutes a week. And then there are even, you know, times when teachers aren't staying in the classroom. So then the language teacher ends up with all these students and they may not be being very respectful or behaving or listening, and they're not necessarily being encouraged by other teachers or school staff to really be, you know, to really be involved in that kind of class. So yes, it's important, obviously, but we also need to not make it so difficult for our language teachers, especially those who may not be certified in other to teach other things, to be supported within the school environment, and also to, you know, recognize that the tribes certifying them have demonstrated that these people do have an expert level of knowledge, and they do deserve you know, a good amount of pay just like other teachers. So just something I wanted to mention when we're talking about language teaching.
It is, Jim.
Do we have local language teachers that are not state certified and not being paid the same amount as a state certified teacher?
Is that for me?
We had this is Margot. We had one teacher at at Orleans Elementary that was not certified through the state. All the others are.
Okay, any other discussion on this before we move on?
So this next, I think that some of the issues in the broad course of study and course access have been discussed. So it's not, yeah, they're not all separated. In the last month, well, the last meeting we had in April, I also included the list from EdCode, what we're required to offer. And it always ends with "and anything that the district says that we have to put in." And when we did the approval of the Indian land tenure curriculum, that was another piece of the discussion, saying that, you know, that could be something that the district could say, we want this to be one of the courses that is offered to students. So here's some of the feedback from the community meeting about enhancing the implementation of course access. Comes back to some things that have some themes that we're hearing about transportation, having high interest topics, training for educators for inclusive classrooms. And that term inclusive classrooms is really in education is specific to inclusion of students with disabilities, inclusion of students who have special education services. I know that and you know, kind of vernacularly, that would be inclusive classrooms that are welcoming and warm and where kids feel like this is their, you know, their place to be. But in this context, it is specific to special education related services. Again, professional development. So the course access is the district actually offering the courses. And then what we also have on here is we're offering the courses, but then, you know, removing barriers so that students can actually access them. So getting to school, having highly engaging activities. So, and Laura Lee, I guess you'll see halfway down, it says fully funded music and language programs at all sites. That was a recommendation from a participant. And I know that music is something that has come up. And so, you know, we could look at, we have some music offerings, full across all sites. That's not something that we currently offer. So I don't know if there was any other comments on this area of the course access for students.
So this is Carrie Waddy. When we're looking at these various suggestions that or priorities that have come up, I don't see any that I disagree with. I think these are all good.
Yeah,
they're all
yes.
good, and I would support all of these. And yeah, when you were talking about music, I think that we were having trouble finding music teachers.
So I agree that there's nothing, there are no bad ideas here. It's just in terms of if we are faced with making a decision between hiring a music teacher or a tutor, that's where I would like the direction, because that would be the prioritization. Are we going to prioritize? You know, and we might not be faced with that. We might not have to do a either or, but we may. And so that's why, in terms of like the, you know, the broad areas of really investing in our academic supports for students. And I think there are so many related services, but at some points there might be that, you know, okay, we're going to do a hiring push, and we definitely have to have our LPs and have them highly trained. So that's where the, you know, I agree, Carrie, that there's nothing disagreeable here. It's just when we start looking at what is it that is the most important thing to address first.
I'd like to hear from our tribal representatives on that topic. Jim?
It's a difficult one.
Jenna? Anybody?
I think we had at the beginning of all of this, the priority is after everybody met, lined out for us. And if we can fit these things that are, you know, these enhancing things underneath of them without running out of money, I think we should try our best to do those kinds of things. But if we do come to a point where we have to make a decision of priorities, I think we should go with what, you know, what's been lined out at the beginning as to what the community wants for their priorities.
So is it, you're going back to these are just the themes, and the community survey was one you know, stakeholder event where this was through a survey. You know, we have the IPP recommendations, and so yeah, I mean, if the board actually went through and ranked these in terms of, you know, importance, that would be a great exercise for us to go here. We asked other people to do it, so that would be, again, back to those priorities. And even if it was like the IPP task force didn't like the idea of ranking all 12, they said, let's come up with groups. And I thought that was fine. Like, here's our top 4, our next 4, and the things that, you know, again, we're not bad ideas and not unimportant, but just we're not the like burning, like we absolutely have to address this, you know, and be completely assured. So I just wanted to put this back up here with the, you know, the 12 areas. And then of course the board has this additional responsibility for long-term financial outlooks for the district.
Can you tell us how many responses there were to the survey? And were responders asked simply to put them in rank order, or were they asked on a Likert scale of 1 to 3 or 1 to 5, you know, most, highest priority, lowest priority, and intervals in between? How many responses were they, and how did the survey work?
So that was something that was put out by the LCAP planning team. We did have them actually ranked, because what I found is when you ask people, is this a priority? People, they'll say yes to everything, which doesn't really give a sense of, you know, what is, you know, if you had to pick one thing that was really important.
But were there point scores attached to the priorities? Like, you know, so that you could do a mathematical ranking from the point scores they got?
We had, yeah, I haven't presented you with like the raw data that came from Craig.
Or how many respondents there were?
I'd have to look. I mean, we don't get everybody.
I'd like to establish that there was an adequate sample and a statistically reliable set of results. I would like to see the raw data.
Okay, so and I know that Craig had put in one of his reports just, you know, more information. So this is kind of a menagerie of community input, including the survey. I would not say that we should, you know, the survey should not dictate the board's priorities. It is consultation and input, you know, so we have all these different sources that are kind of coming to you as, here's what we found out from people, you know. And I think that this part that was provided with the parent, with the community meeting is, you know, maybe more insightful than the numbering, because it's the actual, like, here's where people spoke and said, here's what we see would be important to provide for this next part with providing a mechanism for parent involvement. So I think that it's kind of a layered, there is not it's not one way of collecting information. So it's
Did people identify as parents or community members who aren't parents, or
there were you know, and a number of people have multiple roles. There'll be parents, community members affiliated with the tribe. So we actually have the majority were families. That's what I do.
What?
The majority were families of the respondents.
I would like to see the raw data. it's hard to make decisions based on data if we don't know whether it's valid or not, if it's statistically reliable or not.
Getting our parents to respond has historically been very hard.
Yeah.
So we seem to be happy with what we can get.
Because this is a lot of information.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it looks to me like there was lots of response.
Like Jen said, we have to, this is just a piece of it. We can't base everything on this piece because you get oftentimes the people that respond to any kind of a survey are like one group of type of people. You know, you don't get a super good response. You know, there's a lot of people who they're not ever going to respond unless they're unhappy about something.
Then where do the rest of the responses come from?
No, that's what I mean is you don't get that response. You might get it.
Is what you're
You might get it from, you know, well, this person told the teacher, this is what I like, you know, so. Yeah, I mean, we always have to take into consideration that this is a piece of, this is a portion of our community, but not all of them.
And you as trustees may have things that we just miss on surveys. I think that that's another part. You know your communities, and you might not have the, you know, representation here, but you can look at your school sites. You've got, you know, you walk the halls, you volunteered to serve a meal, so you know exactly what the needs are at the school sites. I think all of those things, it's have to go into, you know, the direction that the board sets, because it is ultimately, you know, the board saying, here's what we want. And then, you know, I think it's really great that we do have these insights from.
I'm really happy that core academic instruction is number one since we are a school.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Margot?
Because the board is the ultimate decision-making authority for our district, when we ask you guys to prioritize these things, does that negate all the input of the surveys and community meetings we've had?
It's a really good question.
I have a response to that. But it's the board's, you know, role to take that input and integrate it into a thoughtful prioritization to give us staff to give me direction. So I don't think that any one meeting, because like Martha, you'll have different people show up or respond to surveys, should not dictate, but it definitely informs the board. Like we are giving the board a lot of information about what families are saying and what staff are saying. It's a great opportunity to take multiple measures and integrate it into here are the priorities for the board. So I don't think it would ever negate. It might not be exactly in alignment because the board has
I think one of the
covering
things
considerations.
I think one of the things that would help the board here is maybe knowing how many people had input at what venues, what was it, site councils, was it community meetings, was it, so that we have a better idea of the cross section of where the information is coming from. Maybe not the statistically reliable and all the formal things we would do with the other things, but at least know where the information is coming from. Debbie.
Margot, is this the survey that was taken like maybe not last year? Maybe it was last year that, you know, you guys went around to all the different schools and had event nights and parents and grandparents, everybody came from the community and filled out surveys. And then there were like incentives for it and people came. There was a lot of people I know that came to our school. And I think here in Hoopa too, there was a lot. And you guys had it in Orleans. Every school had like an event night. Remember we did the acorns and things. Is that what this is from?
No, this is more recent information, Deb. This survey and these community meetings have taken place within the last 2 months.
Oh, okay.
So what the other The one that you're talking about was a update on the previous 3-year LCAP, but we're beginning a new LCAP cycle. And so we're getting input on this newly developed one. So the information is all new, or the input.
So were these at each community, like Trinity Valley, Uqua, Witchpet, Jack Norton, Orleans?
It started
were.
that way. Go ahead, Margot, because I don't know if you went to the community meetings.
So Tavuchi is on the Parent Advisory Committee, and the Parent Advisory Committee set up Zoom meetings because you can't meet in person, but they were set up for each different school site, the first meetings. And then after the first initial meeting, she set up some combined meetings, like a combined meeting for the river schools and then Hoopa, Willow Creek. The survey, however, was sent out to everybody and their brother in multiple ways. It was sent out on email, it was put in the newspaper, was advertised on the radio, it was put on the websites, on Facebook, and there was a pretty good number of responses to the survey. We are now circulating a new survey to get more detailed information. That has been out for a week, and we have 127 responses on it so far and gaining.
You blanked out on us. You had 125.
127 respondents so far.
Okay, because the audio kind of blinked out on you there.
I'm part of that parent advisory committee. I went to the parent advisory committee meetings, and I know about the committee. I know about all of the meetings that you mentioned. I agree with you, Margot. There were a lot of them. The one thing that I was going to ask is, Taguchi mentioned that they were going to try to get student surveys out, and I haven't heard anything about that.
Great. I think it's in the works. I don't know, Margot, do you remember what the timeline is on that? It's been written, and then we usually, pass it around and look for flaws and try to improve it. Margot, was that something you were sending out soon?
I anticipate that will be going out before the end of the week. We were kind of waiting for more students to be back in school so that students could take it in person and the teacher could, talk about it a little.
Martha?
Oh, is this new survey, is that on the website, on the district website?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Are we-
survey.
We're not voting on it. We're
No,
gonna
not
just
taking any action.
look at it some more. Okay.
Any other comments?
Or any music?
That's someone's phone.
Sorry. Any other comments?
I just wanted to say with this last piece with pupil engagement in terms of school attendance rates, chronic absenteeism, dropout, and graduation rates, those are, again, they're great things to know about our school and capture that data. Tomorrow at the MTSS district team, we're going to ask that group to set some expected outcomes for 3 years down the road. So, attendance is something that rural schools, across the county struggle with getting kids to school. There's a lot of obstacles there, but, and the chronic absenteeism is a rate if a student misses more than 10%, so that would be 18 days of school or more. So getting the attendance rates down and getting the chronic absenteeism rates, attendance rates up, absenteeism down. So there's a number of different measures. So we're looking at a 3-year plan, like what do we want to see for students in 3 years? And part of this, again, is our ideas about, engaging programs so that kids will say, yes, get me to school. And then us, again, the school facilitating that. So I think that transportation has showed up on every one of these pages. We have a really robust transportation service, but we know that there are still some needs there.
Okay, so did you have any other discussion?
That was just numbering.
Oh,
I think that
Byron?
I just have one thing I want to bring up. I think this is a good place to do that this time. As you know, I wrote Our Home Forever, and that came out in '79. I just checked tonight and it's going for $920 at Amazon. So that's kind of out of the question of ever having it as a curriculum in school. But I've got this other one coming out, probably the first of the year. And it's taking up where that one left off. They're history books is what they are on Moodle. What does it take to have it submitted for curriculum in this district here? Our Home Forever was turned down because they said there was other tribes had were going to school here. So they thought it wasn't fair to have Hoopa history taught and not the others. But that's mainly why it wasn't.
You know,
Who said that?
I don't know the answer to that question, but that book was one of the best books I ever read from a non-native perspective. I felt like anybody who ever moved into this area should read that book.
Aren't there 2 editions of it too?
No, they would just have one. And there was 4 printings.
Because it seems like, I mean, I have the original. I didn't know it was like $900.
I'll hide it. I'll hide it, yeah,
The first one was a hardback.
Yeah, that's the
And
one
the
I
3
had.
were paperbacks.
Yeah, I think Erica told me that, that there were some updated versions of it. If they were just reprints, then they
Yeah,
wouldn't have
You know,
changed.
I
We'll
have
check
like
into
12
that.
copies that were.
We'll check into that and get back to you.
Yeah.
On
So
what we need to
who
do.
is it the state or is it the district?
Well, I took it to the county school district.
Oh.
That was one that told me. I tried to do it the same thing. Was it? What didn't fit their curriculum on the area. Here it was because too many other tribes.
So we'll,
That was in '79. So.
yeah, we'll figure that out and get back to you. Also, another topic that's going on that we have had school students involved in is the Adobe project, and also developing the Educational Interpretive Center, which would give the history of the whole area and the military presence. That's been on hold because of COVID.
Yeah.
But that's another opportunity for our students and our people here to know about the fort that was here. A lot of them don't know. So there's a lot of possibilities that we can. That's why I was interested in the ethnic studies curriculum that was approved by the state or recommended. So let's see, where are we at here, Jen?
Just at the end of school climate and just some recommendations, including campus beautification and having, that would be facilities. Again, this is kind of woven through that the one additional piece that's here is increased extracurricular activities, clubs, performance and sports. Maker spaces would refer to some of our STEAM projects where students get to do some creative use of repurposing materials. So those were some other, basically getting the school climate to be positive through activities, the educational activities that are engaging. And then the last section is about student outcomes. It has to do, the main area here is students' proficiency in terms of grade level assessments on the statewide assessment and our local assessments. So this year is extremely troublesome for the statewide assessments. The federal government is requiring that states do some sort.
KTJUSD has a question.
Jen, I want to go back to the previous slide when you're talking about school climate.
Yeah,
I really think it's
hang on a second.
important-
Let me get there. Okay. So this is measured by the state, but through suspension, expulsion, and
I think it's really
surveys.
Okay, so I think it's really important that we look at two of the elements that were in the previous presentation when we're talking about training our teachers that are incoming. I don't think that any of our students on the reservation should have to suffer through training or teaching a new teacher how they should be treated. Our children shouldn't have to instruct teachers that no, they don't wear costumes. Yes, they're still here. Those are basic things that every teacher should know and understand when they take a job working on the reservation. So I really think that in order to improve school climate, we need to include cultural sensitivity training for incoming teachers.
Right.
The second thing I think that we need to incorporate into this section for school climate, and we've been talking about it over and over and over again, is, I forgot the name of it.
Trauma-informed.
The trauma-informed care, the trauma-informed training of staff. I think that those are two ways that we really need to look at addressing school climate. Because yes, it does have to do with the eco-friendly community projects and campus beautification is important, but we really need to look at the relationships that our students have with their teachers and the relationships that students have with the staff who are actually dealing with them every day.
Yes.
I think that it's so much bigger than just school climate. I think it goes into student success, it goes into your dropout rates, it goes into students wanting to be there. Because students will sit in a room that's not attractive if the teacher is treating them well, if the teacher is kind, if the teacher understands where they're coming from. And I think that even in the last couple of years, we've had examples of Native students being very upset by things that incoming teachers have said and refusing to go to school the next day, or it affects their week. And I think that is our responsibility as a board and your responsibility as the superintendent to be sure that people that you hire understand where they're working and are here because they want to create a better environment for the kids.
Great. Okay.
So I think it needs to be implemented in that section somewhere.
I think that's really insightful. I would agree that the relationships between students and all of the adults, including their teacher, are probably, can go over anything.
Goes in there too.
Yeah, that was in the Indian policies and procedures. One of the recommendations is that they be trained within the first year.
Yeah.
But even before.
And I know that Jim had talked about the CAM-CHEM instructional materials earlier, and I happened to sit in on one of the classes that was happening. I'm not enrolled, but I had happened to sit into one of the classes that she was conducting, and some of the students who were actually students at Humboldt State that had come from the reservation gave examples of things that had happened to them in our classrooms. And I was appalled. I was furious because I thought those kids are going to school on the reservation. They should never have to suffer that, and I think that we all need to be aware that that's happening, and it's the adult's responsibility, not the kid's responsibility, to train them up or to correct them. It's our responsibility to do that. So I think it's important.
Along that line, in the past, I homeschooled 2 of my grandchildren because of a teacher telling them how they should act, how they should dress, yada, yada, which was going way against our cultural norms here. So that was a while ago, but it does happen.
Right, and one of the things that benefits our kids here on the reservation is that they don't suffer that. They shouldn't suffer that. We have control over what happens in our classrooms. And I was just appalled that would happen here. And the teacher moves on, but the kids are
Well, I
you know,
think even
suffer
this-
for a long time. They're scarred by this, even discussing it at the college level. You know, that teacher was here a year, moved on to something else. So
But I think the schools on the coast, all the school districts in the surrounding, like Aboriginal territory, should have this available in their classrooms and history to show them. For instance, just this last year, we had a group of Boy Scouts showed up on Pequot Creek and set up their camp and was just having the time of their lives playing in the forts. The forts, they said. That was the sweat house and the Indian house. And they said those are their forts and they're playing in them. And that was Boy Scouts. And we were like, oh my goodness, you know, like they have no idea. Nobody has ever talked to them about, you know. And so we had a hard time that day. My daughter wanted to like, take somebody out.
I agree, Kadisha, that's good insight for that school climate.
Yeah.
but I am all about beautification of the sites too. I think that,
Yeah,
I like
yeah.
that, but I think we need to look at it on a deeper level.
And I think the other thing is, you know, beautification, it is ongoing, but there's, you know, sometimes there's one-time, you know, investments of time. But the teacher relationship with the students, like every year that's, you know, children are making new relationships with the adults as they move through the grade levels. So I think that is something that fits into this in terms of being a long-term plan.
So back to you, where are we at?
So I'm on this last category, which has to do with student achievement. So this is the grade level standards with English language arts and math, high school metrics, which I will put out for the high school to really give us guidance in terms of the, you know, the A to G requirements, students that are able to pass the AP exam or have the early academic placement. So, you know, on a broader scale, the number one thing here is English language arts and math assessments and how many students we have that are at grade level and where we want to, you know, what our target is for in 3 years. In terms of meeting, so this is again, meeting grade level standards and some of the high school requirements, and then how can we increase student achievement as measured by our state assessments, those other measures with the AP. And so we have ideas about how to increase student academic achievement. And a lot of it ties, you know, academic achievement ties into other dimensions of student success. So here's that list for you.
Comments?
And then the last thing that I'll show you, I'll wait till you wait a second to look at this, is recommendations from the teachers, you know, because they're the ones that are closest with this student. Okay.
Sue has a comment.
I would like to get kids out of the classroom more.
Uh-huh.
It's a really oppressive environment for a lot of students. I did a lot of research in my second master's degree program, which was about American Indians in higher education, but it went into all kinds of teaching practices. And research has been done that shows if you take a cohort of students who are same numbers of Indians and non-Indians, and you teach them the exact same lesson plans in a classroom, and then you teach them the same, you have a similar, you know, group, the experimental group, and you teach them those lesson plans outdoors, the non-native kids will learn the same. They'll learn as well in either environment, but the Indian kids will learn so much better outdoors in a natural environment. And, you know, over the last several years up in Orleans, the Cutter tribe has done a lot of hands-on learning, working with the schools to get kids out into the natural environment, working STEM subjects, science, you know, technology, math, outdoors, a lot of field work, a lot of learning out there. And it improved attendance, it improved engagement, it improved, a lot of the learning because it just felt so much better. Students who wanted to be there, they didn't want to miss these lessons. And I was the external evaluator for that. It was called the Pick-Out Institute. They developed tons of curriculum. I was the external evaluator for that program for 4 years. And, I don't think they'd mind if I shared the evaluation reports with the school board here. Lots of the work they did was replicable. And, it was just amazing. I mean, imagine you're familiar with the work that Lisa Hellman and Heather.
So there's curriculum already developed that could be replicated. Maybe that's something Margot can check into. Okay, are we, any other comments before we go on, Jen?
It meets state standards too. They worked with UC Berkeley to develop the curriculum lesson plans.
Okay, Jen?
Okay, thank you for that, Sue. I love when you started with one of your kids outside. So I wanted to
I would
also.
like to add a quick comment.
Margot?
Sorry. I would like to add a quick comment to that. Thank you, Sue, for the opportunity. I just wanted to say that I completely agree that we need to incorporate a lot more outdoor learning opportunities for our students. We are hoping to start developing an outdoor landscape down at the Jack Norton School, as well as we have begun doing the native plant gardens up in Hoopa and Witchpeck. But I think that is very worth pursuing to really capitalize on.
Well, and you froze, Marco, but I'll add that you had a fire, introducing fire, which was amazing. Mickwick does amazing. We have a lot of outdoor stuff going on in Orleans.
It's a partnership with the Tribes Department of Natural Resources and the Mid-Klamath River Region watershed. Yeah, Mickwick. Yeah, and they bring in experts from UC Berkeley and from Oregon State or University of Oregon. They bring people in, and they have kids actually doing scientific research in the forest. They did research on sudden oak death on trees in the region, and it's just kind of amazing what they did.
Is that something we could look at, developing outdoor classrooms on each site? Is that a possibility that we could look at with this?
Seemed like, Margot, weren't you doing a lot of that same stuff?
Yes, so I was part of the initial project in Orleans with Heather. And then we moved it out. We took that curriculum and brought it out to the other schools, Rick and I. We are now in a collaborative relationship with Two Feathers to start building a junior firelighters program. And so once again, it would be based around science. Students would be doing, and then hopefully be able to be there while the burn is taking place, and then do post-burn surveys about the different kinds of plants that return. So I don't know how the board feels about having small plots of land to use for those experiments on school property, but it would be pretty ideal. Some of the schools are already putting in hazel plants and things like that that need to have fire in order to reproduce basket materials. And it could be done, and I would really like the district to start thinking about that, because the opportunity is here, and the Two Feathers program, their liability coverage would cover it.
Okay, let's, I know we're on to 8 o'clock now. Jen, you want to continue?
Well, I just wanted to give you what we have from one portion of some input from consulting with the teachers union. And I think we're looking at there was lots of information, and I would say everything that the board's discussed tonight is in alignment with what teachers have shared. When we focused on the academic piece, because that, they really need to provide us that information, because that is, their wheelhouse is big, but this is their specialization. We looked at, in the next 3 years, trying to have our students at the, reading is the initiative that we're looking at because of this early literacy block grant, the need to revamp the ELA curriculum. So I just wanted to just share with you that there was discussion about setting a goal that in 3 years, we'll have 50% of our students reading at grade level. We wanted to look at, something that's realistic. Of course, we want to target higher, but that was just something I wanted to share with you. And again, with the English language arts training for teachers and coaching for teachers and implementing systems that will support literacy on multiple levels. That seems like that was kind of a place where we landed. And then I have the last slide that just is, things that the board needs to put into consideration and giving direction. I would say probably the thing that, in my mind that jumps out from all of this is our certificate of participation, because that is something that is the largest encroachment into our unrestricted general fund. And then, of course, looking at how we're going to use some of this one-time money to set direction, offset some of our current costs, and make some funding available so that we can really get ahead of the COP, because that's, one of the things that keeps diverting our money from our general fund and from our direct student services. So that's the end of what I have for this part with the LCAP. I have a lot of notes and ideas, and I think that there was a lot of agreement and alignment. What I heard from the board with what is it's consistent with what the staff is saying and with what the community is saying. I still don't have my number one priority from the board or my top 3 or 4.
I would like to come back to the tribe's question of dovetailing their recommendations with the LCAP. So
great.
I'd like some input. Do you feel that all of this input that is being considered?
So I'm going to get back to
Are there areas within all of this that are not, that we've skipped, that we've missed from the recommendations?
I don't think so. I think it's really, there's a lot of alignment here. I think the one part, I think it all lines up. What the recommendations from the task force
For summer school.
Yeah, and there's specific student services, but in terms of any of the restorative practices, it's identified as professional development. And then there's also just, kind of operational, there may be purchasing of materials to support social emotional curriculum. So I think that we have to look at the recommendations and see, what extensions can there be that will be directly tied to things we get into the hands of kids. But I
Okay,
do
now,
see, I
Jim,
see them integrated.
So, Jim, Jenna, you have comments on that?
Yeah, I do. This is Jim McQuillan. Let me turn on my camera here. What came out when we prioritized our needs in the IPP was social emotional support, and the professional development covers some of that, but we need to, I agree, do a better job in tracking who's participating, what certificated and classified staff are participating in opportunities on professional development, whether it's a trauma informed or whether it's the TEMCAM class or other opportunities. But that fits along with the developing work with Two Feathers. They do some excellent work in terms of counseling and supporting the students, and some of these other great activities I hear that are developing. That's really good. I like that idea of getting kids out of the classroom too, and Native kids do blossom when the lessons and the activities are outdoors. I agree with that 100%. Another area that has continued to come up in the IPP is the career technical education. And I know that's a big cost to try to replace those facilities, but we need to continue to work toward that. And not all kids go to college, not all kids need to go to college. We need those opportunities to develop plumbers, auto mechanics, body and fender people, woodworkers, all those career technical education fields. We need to take care of that part of the student population and continue to head in that direction also. And then another one that was a very high priority are basic skills like financial management training. Those basic, we know we send off a lot of kids to college, and then they get their bills for the first time and like, uh-oh, I didn't plan on managing my own finances and have to come back from Reading or move home with their heads held down because they couldn't manage their finances. That's a big area. We need to continue to support kids to learn how to take care of themselves, those basic responsibilities. Anyway, it's getting late, sorry. Thank you.
Jenna, I want Jenna first.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I agree with what Jim has said. The outdoor learning is essential. We have found with our programming, whenever we do stuff outside that are, especially, in different parts, we've done stuff near village sites and things with language that our students just are better. They're more focused, they're more engaged. Students who may be really shy and anxious at school, when they do an outdoor setting and they're learning language and it's built in cultural practices and all these things, they excel. So I think it's really important to include that. And I will, with what Josie was saying earlier, I think it is part of, culturally informed and trauma informed is having teachers who aren't going to come in and further traumatize our students. And, I was talking to someone who's currently in the HSU credential program, and even now there are times when, they have mostly non-native faculty. Obviously, we have a few great native faculty at HSU, but they're not always teaching the teachers in the credential program. And they have other students doing presentations on local tribes with inaccurate information, and the teachers and the professors don't know that it's inaccurate. And so, if there's not somebody from that tribe or with that knowledge, and they just assume, oh, this is accurate, then all these teachers are going out and coming in to teach our kids, with this inaccurate knowledge, and just some really weird things that are disappointing to hear that maybe going on in classes, at HSU, where so many of our local teachers come from. So, it is important that the school address that, and even just having one day or part of one day at the beginning of the year for new teachers or teachers who aren't from here really isn't enough knowledge of, local cultures and enough to really kind of create a safer environment for students when they have these outside teachers who, not all of them definitely, but some of whom may have some really outdated and weird ideas about Native people and history and just some really not great stuff. I think a lot of the stuff that we covered did incorporate a lot of our recommendations, and I will also, as Jim said, the professional are focusing on career and technical education. We in our community need people to do stuff that doesn't necessarily require a 4-year degree. We need early childhood teachers. We need tutors in our JOM program. We need all these staff to fill these positions that don't necessarily require, a 4-year college degree, but could just require some EC classes at CR, things like that, that students could work on in high school if they want to, become a Head Start teacher. They could start working on that in high school, and we could fulfill local needs as well as providing training and education for students who may not want or may not be destined to go to those 4-year colleges and universities. Thank you.
Okay, Sue, you had a question?
Yeah, and this keeps coming up in my mind about the CTE. A lot of people don't even realize that the public schools here are on land that the local tribe provided, that the Hoopa tribe donated for the purpose of developing public schools here. And I think there might be opportunities, and I don't speak for any tribe or anybody, besides being a grant writer with 35 years experience, having worked in Hoopa's tribal education department, in the Hoopa higher education program, having worked with people from College of the Redwoods. College of the Redwoods can't offer their vocational and trades classes here because there's no facility that would be appropriate. The high school can't either. It seems to me like there are opportunities for Hoopa and Yurok and other tribal communities and organizations to join forces with Klamath Trinity Joint Unified School District and College of the Redwoods. Some kind of partnership that would facilitate grant writing that would get the damn building built, without debt or with very little debt. I mean, I can't tell you how many grants I've written that resulted in community facilities being built, but a lot of them on behalf of the Kuduk tribe mostly. Until the Kuduk tribe started a casino, all of their buildings were built debt-free. They were all built with community development block grants. This kind of stuff is doable. It takes a coordinating planning effort. It takes some give and take. It takes trust building, but it can be done. And, I think it could benefit everybody who has struggled to figure out how do we solve this problem. I think the answer is no single entity can, but if we work together, the school district and the college and the tribes whose workforces ultimately would be the beneficiaries, that it could happen. It just would take that effort at, building bridges and working together. It's really frustrating to me as a grant writer who has built things.
Well, CR used to use our building for their classes. So, yeah, that's a really good point. Why aren't
they leased the KTIS campus from the tribe?
Yeah,
that
but they
building
used our
is-
old iTech building, our wood shop, and they used that for years for college
They've
courses.
used other
And other
classrooms
classrooms.
also
Yeah.
for other business math and a lot of other classes before that was built.
And the current
How would-
president, Keith Flamer, is, he's really easy to work with.
So how can we get that going? Do you know of grant sources that we could target?
I haven't tried to research, and my hunch is that CR would be eligible for certain kinds of state capital improvement funds and So with the school district, and tribes would be eligible for certain kinds of federal education monies, Department of Education monies. You know, everybody would have eligibility for some different source of funds that could be pooled together. I think we even could get private foundations, you know, to buy in. And then the thing would be working out a memorandum of agreement that everybody signed on to that spelled out, okay, what is the nature of this partnership?
Right.
You know, who's in control of what? And, you know, the Hupa tribe has a memorandum of agreement with the College of the Redwoods that, to my knowledge, is the only one of its kind in the state for the operation of the Klamath Trinity instructional site. And it evolved over a period of 20 years. I last year did a whole history of that evolution of that MOA. And you can see that at first the wording of it was really tenuous, and then it gets more and more and more and more, you know, of a partnership where, you know, both sides are really, you know, in it now. But, you know, this kind of thing can happen. We would just have to, you know, be determined to make it work. And, you know,
If we could get buy-in from the education department, I was looking at the monies that are coming down. So that I think it was like $190 million set aside for tribal education programs. So maybe if we could partner with tribal education to try to look at doing something like that, and this would be a good time.
You know, and I had a question from Frank Richards, who's doing the building homes by building structure by building homes, and he was asking about when our program would be up and running. I think just kind of to see who was going to feed into his. But there's definitely a lot more interest out there.
So it's definitely a high priority need. So Jim and Jenna, what are your thoughts? How can we get this going?
This is Jim. Let me turn on my camera again. I'm down for what Sue is mentioning. If we put together an ad hoc committee to bring together all the different groups, I'd be down for that and bring my troublesome grant writing skills to the table. Once that an English teacher tell me you'll never be a writer right in front of the whole class, and really just embarrassed me. I've been trying to prove him wrong ever since. That was 30 years ago. But I think we do have some unique partnerships, and tribes do have access to resources that maybe the district doesn't, and vice versa. And we know working in partnership strengthens these grants, and that's what they're asking for. But I'd be down for working on an ad hoc committee to go after some unique funding opportunities. Thank you.
Jenna?
Same. I would also be interested.
Great, okay. And I'd be willing to work with you, Sue. I don't have any grant writing skills. I can just spend the money after it gets here.
What people, you know, I taught grant writing at Humboldt State for a very long time. And what I, you know, the first sentence out of my mouth is grant writing is a misnomer. It's not about the writing. It's about the strategic planning. It's about, you know, needs assessment, strategic planning, you know, strategy, goals, objectives, activities, timeframes, budgets. It's about figuring out how to make this happen. The writing part is easy once you get all those questions answered.
I know that Rob is really, really dedicated to this part of the process. But if he's not interested in assisting, I would be interested. So he would have 3, right?
For the
Committee.
yeah.
Yeah, I would like to help if he's not.
If who's,
Rob, because I know that the ITech is kind of his baby, right?
well, he's more into the technical versus the planning, the construction.
Okay.
So, Sue, would you mind heading up that ad hoc committee?
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay.
And I think, you know, having some experience with HUPA's education department and CR, you know, there might be already some trust built that would help. I would really like for CR to hear from Jim and the Yurok tribe that, you know, there's a regional interest in having this happen, and maybe even creating a replicable model that CR's Crescent City campus could, you know, replicate in and around, you know, Yurok headquarters in Klamath. I think there's some real possibilities here that, you know, could last for decades. We, you know, we need to stop dreaming about it and put one foot in front of the other, start, you know, talking it up.
One of the things that has crossed my mind too, I went back and read some old newspaper articles somewhere. Anyway, the business classes at Hoopa High were part of the career technical ed classes, and listening to the need for personal financial management. You know, so maybe not just, I mean, let's dream big, but build what we can.
And you can build in phases. I mean, you don't have to fund it all and build it all at once. You can, you know, prioritize and do phased. What would be of greatest benefit to the high school students if it's going to be on high school property, high school and or CR? High school students can concurrently enroll in CR classes while they're still in high school.
Right.
And they get more high school credits than, you know, they get like 3 times as many credits in high school as they do at CR, but they can get them both. And so I think gearing it to what are the greatest needs for high school students and then CR students, and then, you know, are there possibilities even for adults in the community to use the facility when minor age students aren't there?
Okay, so ad hoc committee then, Sue, would you get that up? KTJUSD, you can be on it. I will.
Are we gonna call it CTE?
Career
So
technical.
Laura Lee, this
Yeah.
is Jen. I just have one point of order. Sue, can you and I talk about this? I remember I'm having like a memory of something that Ann said about the way committees, even if they're ad hoc, we certainly could have something where it's, you know, advertised and agendized unless it's a staff meeting. So Sue, maybe we can after the, you know, not tonight, but we can have a conversation about if it's going to be a staff meeting, which would mean it's all of the folks that just said they want, you know, to participate.
Get the legal
Yeah.
parameters.
If I can just send that out and
Our
send
attorney
a board meeting.
One of the school attorneys.
Are you having a memory of that, Laura Lee? I think that it
having
being
a
a staff
memory of that.
meeting is different than it being an ad hoc board meeting. Either might be fine, but I just want to know, you know, how we're laying it
Yeah,
out.
let's get the legal parameters of what we're allowed to do.
Doesn't the board have committees? I thought the board has.
But there are certain, yes, but there's certain legal things we have to walk between.
Advertising.
I see what you're saying.
But this is, yeah.
Okay, where are we at in our meeting then?
Well, so the only other part that I had added on is the next item, which was if there was any more discussion about the expanded learning opportunities grant. I did collect a lot of information from you all. It's way narrower in scope than, you know, the LCAP, which is can really, you know, that drives the school operations. So I just wanted to recap to you all what I heard from our last meeting, and it seems like that the goals, a lot of things that came up through the task force, through the board's discussion, are very much in alignment with the 7 supplemental instruction and support strategies, including extending learning time. So there was a big discussion about summer learning opportunities, tutoring or one-on-one or small group learning supports. That was another thing that I heard consistently with discussion about the LCAP and supporting students. Incentivizing employment offers for staff so that we can have good staffing and we have, you know, full staffing that meet the needs. Last meeting, you also talked about increasing positive mental health by offering music, arts, and really not just offering them, but having them integrated into our programs, and supporting teachers through training and coaching, and giving in-depth reading instruction supports, hiring paraprofessionals, and some of the operational things during the summertime. All of those, including training for school staff on strategies, including trauma-informed practices, fit into the goals and the uses of the expanded learning opportunities grant really mesh nicely with the discussions that we've already had. The one area we didn't address last time, and so I just have a question about the community learning hubs that provide students with access to technology, high-speed internet, and other academic supports. It's an allowable supplemental strategy. There's no more detail than that, except for community learning hubs. And I just didn't know if that was something that there were so many other things that we want to invest our time in, or I just didn't want to ignore that. And I don't have any specific recommendations, but I just wanted to acknowledge that that's another allowable use of that ELO grant, or if we feel like we have enough with the things that we discussed, and we can move forward with the summer learning, getting staffing, and getting coaching for reading instruction as the main.
One of the things that's come bubbling to my mind is the Acorn Wireless. I know we have supported our students with that. I'm not sure what kind of support we need now that a lot of them will be have access to the internet. I'm thinking that's something that we probably should support in some way or another. KTJUSD?
Would it be possible to upgrade some things over at the library? Because that's kind of a community hub. Would it be possible to buy them printers or computers or something where students could go? Because we all have iPads, the students all have iPads, but they don't necessarily have printers or paper, ink, that kind of stuff to be able to print out their stuff. I don't even know if we print stuff anymore though.
Well, people come to my house to get printed.
Not much.
So I think we do print, right? I mean, we kind of are, because there's some things that we're still doing. So I'm thinking, because the library is there and they have computers, maybe we could possibly upgrade their computers or upgrade printers or some copy machines. I don't know.
And that would be nice for students that if they knew they were gonna go home and they didn't have this stuff, they would stay after school and take the after school bus home after they go to the library and do their stuff.
Well, the other thing to think about is, we have other communities too, downriver, which there is no library down there.
Is there a space where we could provide like a place, a room or something that has those?
There is in Orleans, because there's the computer center.
Where is that? Is that on campus?
No,
No,
the Hurons buy each of their students computers and printers.
They bought their student computers.
They do, some of their, all the students have computers.
Honestly, I'm looking at the community hubs. I think that the centers, I don't know, my first thing would be checking, of course, with, you guys met Kirtan and Shiloh, because I think I don't know if that would be an allowable use. Because it would be kind of taking public funds for schools. I mean, it's still public funds and still a benefit, but I kind of had my yellow flag going up when we provided the Acorn Wireless funding. That was something that we knew was directly supporting students to do distance learning because they were in their homes. So we can, I would definitely have to run that by.
Well, what other?
The other thing is we have the classrooms and.
Well, something else that came to my mind when you mentioned the community learning hub was that there are parents that would like to have some training on how to work with their students.
Right.
They can have parent trainings there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Another thing I was thinking of is what about a hotline where a parent could call in if they can't figure something out?
Oh,
I
right.
have had to do some crazy math problems with my junior in high school that I just said, I can't figure this out. We're gonna have to, is there access, like, maybe we could pay teachers to answer their phone after hours, or students, college students who have gone through these classes?
There was an act, because I remember that, because I too have not been able to answer questions.
You're not alone.
And I think it might have been fourth grade.
And I was like,
Yeah.
But there are online resources for that. Do they? Okay.
I mean, is there something that this district could sponsor? Because I'm not gonna call it Keat, but if I have a list of, if somebody says this person does math at this time,
Oh,
I
I
might
know.
do that.
YouTube.
Mhm. Oh, I know.
So you weren't talking about,
YouTube. We go to
Well,
YouTube.
something along that line, Jen, we brainstormed.
I thought that you were going to say like a hotline for technology. And I do want to remind folks that, our tech department has their extension, which they've printed, and maybe we need to recirculate that. But you're talking about actual content. And one of the things
anything that parents need help with, because we need, I think parents need support in teaching their students through.
You ask Google.
Well, you're telling me to YouTube it, and I don't even know if I know how to YouTube. So maybe the technology support would be, a good idea, but some of us need to talk, some of us need to be able to ask questions and speak to somebody.
Yeah.
Although I like the idea of not having to talk to anybody, so that might.
Well, I
It's just
also
a
like
lot.
how it circles back to when we had talked about really utilizing our high school students in terms of supporting, doing direct support. So I think that that's another really creative use that I don't know, where it will go. It's kind of in the mixing pot right now, but we, kind of comes full circle back to talking about having high school students who have skills in math, being able to support younger students. And I think that would be an extension that would be welcome. If they'll take us up on it. So we have to formulate some plans. So I just wanted to bring I introduced that in case there were any additional thoughts. We will, I think, the majority of that funding will probably be allocated towards these increased, instructional minutes or hours or days for students. And our earlier discussion, we kind of came full circle around talking about having a summer program that's really engaging where kids want to come to school. That's, we can't do anything if they don't show up. So.
Do we have a learning lab on campus?
You mean like a computer lab?
Like a learning lab that's that's staffed. So if students have questions, they can go to that learning lab and have somebody work with them.
At the high school.
Just their homeroom, right?
Yeah, I mean, because if we're looking at.
Sometimes the library will do that.
But if we could provide a space for students that really need some assistance that's staffed, that might be helpful after school.
Especially with COVID, because we could do that.
Distance learning, I mean, it's just like.
Well, one of the suggestions was, to hire students who have had the class and were able to mentor or tutor students.
But we need a safe place for them to be able to do that.
A safe place, so you're
I'm
thinking.
thinking of the facility, a safe space that has an adult person there that's, monitoring it. But that was just my.
Okay.
Because I like the idea of utilizing students who.
They still need adult
There
supervision.
still needs to be somebody. Still needs to be somebody.
In high school, you have the library and there's usually.
Back in
an adult
1979, we did cross-age tutoring where it
But
was one of
after
our
hours.
classes. We went from the high school over to the elementary and helped students.
But I think you're thinking maybe after hours or is
After
this?
hours, after hours. Well, with distance learning, we have people on campus different times, so it could be open all the time because.
During the day.
Yeah,
so-
during the day. When Nijonda was at Trinity Valley, they did that would you say cross eight, where the eighth graders went in and worked with the kindergartners and the first graders.
Yeah,
And I think it was really effective.
yeah.
The older kids read with the younger kids. They
Right.
did the math problems with the younger
Yeah.
kids. And Najona was reading out of kindergarten because they spent so much time interacting with each other. So I think that's a good idea.
And then because this is when I was in school here, we got credit for that. It was one of our classes. It was cross-age tutoring.
Yes, and I, as a teacher, benefited from the cross-age tutoring that happened from the high school. High school kids came over to the elementary school.
Yeah.
Well, and also with the cross-age tutoring, a lot of times the high school student needed to fill in some of their gaps, so they
Right.
went and tutored the younger kids,
Mhm.
and that gave them a lot of incentive and built up their confidence so that they
And I like to
also.
think that it was really helpful for the teachers.
Oh, yeah.
It is. Anytime you can get extra bodies in the room safely, I think that it's necessary.
Okay, Jen, I'm gonna. Do you get what you need here now?
I do. You can.
Okay, so now refresh our memories. The expanded learning ELO grant has to be in by June 1.
Correct.
And the LCAP has to be completed by
July 1 is when the board has. to
July
adopt
1.
it, But we have it scheduled because we do it, that's a two-phased, two-step process. So we will bring, we just consulted with the county. They need they have to provide us a lot of information. I think it's like a 10-day between them processing before we can bring the LCAP to the board. So we currently are scheduled for June. I think it's the 22nd. We just confirmed with the county. Carmi, do you remember the dates? I know that we just talked about it.
We have to have our LCAP done by June 2nd.
That's what I thought.
And that will give the county their 10-day window before we have a public hearing, which will be on June 22nd. And then we will have the adoption of the LCAP plan on June 24th.
Okay. Any other questions,
I need to
comments?
know when our next meetings are.
Our next meetings?
Yeah, we're talking about dates in June that aren't the regularly scheduled board meeting.
Yeah, normally in June we have, because the budget also has to be approved before July 1. We usually, so anyway, give us dates again on what meetings are
Sure,
scheduled.
and we can email these out to you all.
Yeah,
So we
okay.
just met with the county. So so we have our, the next meeting is our regular May meeting.
So we have a meeting coming up next Tuesday.
Next week.
On the 11th at 5. That's what I've
So
got.
can you refresh me? Is it the second Tuesday of every month for a regular meeting?
Usually.
Usually, just for a regular meeting. And then all of these other meetings are special meetings that we've been having.
Then
May 11 is at 5. That's what I've got on my calendar.
I think I'll have to confirm, what we have in closed session. That sounds right for what we have for closed session. But we said we'd set the start time so that we ended closed session at 6, so that open session ends at 6. But I think it'll be 5. But I have to do an agenda review with you, Laura Lee, before we 100%.
And I have an agenda item that needs to be on there too, Jen, so I need to see you after this meeting.
So June 1st, we will have to schedule a meeting to approve that expanded learning opportunities grant that does not require a public hearing, but it has to be brought to the board on June 1st. It's such a funny timing because everything else is July 1st.
Special meeting.
So I think that could be another 5 o'clock.
So can you have at our next Tuesday's meeting dates for the rest of the board meetings?
Yeah, would you prefer that? We can just provide you a list at that time.
Okay, so are we, any other business, any other comments?
I have one. This is Jim McQuillan, if I can, please. I just want to thank you all. This has been a lively, very productive meeting. Really good ideas. So I appreciate that. I've got 2 items I'm going to email email all of you. I'm getting kind of tired too, but 2 legislative bills coming down that'll impact Native students. One on school attendance. These are proposed bills that really could help us out on Native attendance, as well as one on curriculum. One is by Assemblyman Ramos, and then Deal out of District 1, Reading. So I'll email them. You can look at them tomorrow. We're tired right now. Thank you all for the meeting, though.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you for coming. Any other comments? Margot?
I can't hear you.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Something she thought was.
But it's funny.
Right here, there you go. Try.
I just wanted to say good night.
Oh. Margot, this is Carrie.
Yes.
We were
Yes.
talking about outdoor education for Native students, and Trinity County got some kind of an award from a California award for their outdoor education program that takes the kids that have the most problem in class, and there are a lot of Native American kids, and they do an outdoor education program for them. So if I can find where I got that information from, because I remember reading it and thinking, oh, this is really good, I'll let you know.
There's a lot of research.
That
to
would be
support
awesome.
the effectiveness of.
Pardon me?
Is that the school? Is that the school in Weaverville?
I think it is.
Oh, thank
Also
you.
send-
That is a great tip.
Also send me the link for the IPP tomorrow. Okay, any other
Oh, yeah.
comments?
All right.
I just wondered if anybody had any feedback from the community, or anybody talking to you about our phase 5 open.
It's not on our agenda tonight.
Okay. Yeah, because it sounded like Rupael.
I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Debbie moves to adjourn, Martha seconds. Roll call.
Trustee Myers, Trustee McLaughlin,
Aye.
Trustee Purcell,
Aye.
Trustee Colgrove,
Yes.
Trustee George,
Aye.
Trustee Waddy,
Aye.
6 to 7 with Rob absent.
Okay, thank you.
Good night, everyone.
We are
Thank you.
adjourned.
What would happen if somebody said no?
Good night.
Okay, so we couldn't talk.